Hi, this is Karin Smith from Radio Free South Africa with my take on rhinos. As an enthusiastic new American citizen with high hopes for a bright future in this shining city upon a hill, imagine my shock as I began to realize that the USA is run on the same lines as any African dictatorship. Americans decry African dictators such as Robert Mugabe, who has been in power in Zimbabwe since 1987. He is the ultimate power in that country and does not give a fig for what the people either need or want. He and his cronies have hugely enriched themselves at the cost of the entire country. Yet, in the USA, the same thing is taken as a matter of course. Too many senators have been in power for way too long and have become rich off of special interests and other nefarious pursuits. Both sides of the aisle are guilty of this. For example, Mitch McConnell has been in D.C. for 32 years and has an estimated worth of $22.5 million. John McCain has been in D.C. for 34 years with an estimated net worth of $21 million. Chuck Grassley has been in D.C. for 36 years and Lindsey Graham for 22. I simply cannot believe that the founders of this great nation intended for Congress to be a full-time career for anyone. On an average annual salary of $174,000, how is it that these people amass such great wealth during their so-called public service? I am certain that the greatest weapon in America's arsenal in its global fight against tyranny and oppression is not the size of its economy or the might of its military. It is the power of its example. Any American diplomat urging African interlocutors to respect the provisions of their own constitutions would find that their position was strengthened by the international respect for our own constitutional order. Activists in Africa and Eastern Europe take extraordinary risks to demand respect for the rule of law in their own countries, in part because they saw the impact of the rule of law in America. Without the powerful example of our democratic ideals in practice, the United States would be just another country, with an economy and a military that happen to be larger than most. It would not be, as Ronald Reagan famously said, a shining city on a hill, whose commitment to freedom and democracy inspired allies and aspirants around the world. Conversely, the failure to adhere to our democratic values at home comes at a tangible cost to our ability to advance our interests abroad. It is emboldening some African political elites, for example, to openly question whether or not democracy is just a Western import that is incompatible with African culture. Our ability to help negotiate peace and to support the rule of law abroad is directly tied to our commitment to good governance and the rule of law at home. We cannot help make the world safe for democracy, in the immortal words of President Woodrow Wilson, if we do not first ensure the credibility of democracy in the United States. No matter how badly Trump wants to drain the swamp, it's not going to happen until we add a term limits amendment to the Constitution. Some will say that's what voting's for, but that isn't going to cut it. And the proof is in the last 30 years of elections, where over 90% of Congress members were re-elected, no matter how corrupt or incompetent they were. Why? Because between the power of the polarized parties and the mountains of money from lobbyists who want to keep their puppets in office, a challenger doesn't stand a chance. Last election, 58% didn't even have a challenger in the primaries. It's time for we, the people, to step up and help Trump drain the swamp. Remember all the Republicans who campaigned and won on repealing Obamacare? For 7 years, the pathetic GOP RINOs chanted, "Repeal and replace," like a mantra over and over. Yet, 2 years later, after several repeal votes, we still have Obamacare. Why? I'll tell you why. Because there is no Republicans versus Democrats anymore. It's all one big globalist party. And the only reason these cowardly RINOs voted to repeal in 2015 was because they knew it didn't matter. Obama would veto it. And he did. It was all a show. These GOP RINO elites had no plans on ever repealing this disastrous healthcare policy. They just feigned anger and commitment in order to win elections and re-elections. The worst part is they managed to make themselves exempt from having to use Obamacare, leaving the American people, who they view as peasants, to suffer under the brutal policy by themselves. Now, after what we've witnessed in the House and Senate, the RINO extinction must happen. If we ever want to regain control of our country from these entitled career political elites who see themselves as our lords and superiors, we need to vote out and remove every single one of them. The great Charlie Daniels wrote an op-ed this week which says it much better than I ever could. Quote, "The DC club of establishment politicians care more about power than they do about public service. The problem is on both sides of the aisle, with both Democrats and Republicans. The prosperity and security of the United States is not a priority for these politicians. Re-election and power have taken the place of patriotism and honor in an atmosphere where betrayal is acceptable and common sense is as scarce as unicorns," he said. Those folks, with very few exceptions, don't give a damn about us or the country. All they care about is winning, and they'd sell your whole generation down the drain if it meant they could keep their ivory towers for another season. Average Americans are not part of the club and never will be. You're just a hard-working American citizen who doesn't participate in subsidized platinum insurance programs, nor spend the taxpayers' money to ensure that you'll return to your job next year. If American industry does come back, if the economy does soar, if the chronic influx of illegal immigrants does ebb, if our streets are rid of violent street gangs, if the Supreme Court is again weighted toward constitutionality, patriotism, and common sense, if our one-sided international trade deals are either fixed or discarded, if our military does regain and retain its rightful place as the best equipped, best manned, most technologically advanced, and highly motivated on the planet, if the little Pillsbury doughboy in North Korea gets his chubby butt handed to him, if Iran's feet are held to the fire, if American energy sources are tapped and utilized to make us totally energy independent, if these and other goals of the Trump admin are reached, the days of the career politician are over. If that day ever comes, people will demand term limits, and empires will fall as senators, congressmen, lobbyists, and bureaucrats find themselves on a level playing field with the same people they lied to and took advantage of for so long. End quote. And, in conclusion, like many English words, rhinoceros comes from words of another language, in this case, Greek. Rhinoceros is made from the words rhino, meaning nose, and keros, meaning horn. So next time you use the shortened version of their name, just realize that you're saying nothing more than nose. A group of rhinos is properly referred to as a crash. So in my opinion, it is time to crash these rhinos.